Maya Rodriguez sat in her small quarters aboard the Starship Liberty and stared at the glowing screen in front of her. The application form for the Elite Operations Division filled the display with its impossible requirements and warnings that made her stomach twist. She had read it 20 times already, but kept coming back to the same conclusion. This was either the biggest mistake of her life or the chance she had been waiting for since joining the space fleet. The Elite Operations Division was legendary throughout the galaxy. For 300 years they had taken only the best candidates from the most advanced alien species. The Vorthik, with their crystal bodies that could process information faster than any computer. The Etherians, who existed as pure energy and could be in multiple places at once. The Syntoids, with their mechanical bodies and quantum brains that never made mistakes. These were the beings who handled the most dangerous missions in space, where regular soldiers would die in seconds. Humans had never been invited to apply. When Earth joined the Galactic Coalition 15 years ago, the other species made it clear where humanity belonged. Supply runs between planets, maintenance work on space stations, guard duty at peaceful outposts. The aliens saw humans as soft, slow creatures who were barely smart enough to handle simple tasks. Maya had spent 5 years watching alien officers give orders while humans did the boring work that kept the fleet running. Commander Jake Harrison knocked on her door and entered without waiting for permission. He was a good man who had fought hard to get humans better assignments, but even he looked worried when he saw what she was reading. His face went pale as he realized what Maya was planning to do. "Rodriguez, you cannot be serious about this," he said, sitting down across from her tiny desk. "Do you know what happened to the last 50 candidates who applied for Elite Ops? 20 died during the testing process. The rest were sent home broken and crazy. And those were advanced species with natural advantages we do not have." Maya looked up at her commander with determination burning in her dark eyes. She had made up her mind weeks ago, but had been afraid to tell anyone. Now that the moment was here, she felt strangely calm about what she was about to do. The worst they could do was reject her application or kill her trying to prove herself worthy. "Sir, someone has to be the first," she said, keeping her voice steady. "Every human in the fleet is watching to see if we will always be second class. Citizens out here, if I do not try, then no one will. My little sister back on Earth wants to join the Space Marines when she turns 18. I want her to have better options than cleaning alien toilets and carrying supplies." Harrison shook his head and pulled up the requirements on his own tablet. The list made for Griv reading. Candidates needed to survive in environments that would crush human bones instantly. They had to process information and make decisions faster than human brains could handle. The psychological testing alone had driven members of mentally superior species completely insane. "Look at these physical requirements, Maya," he said, pointing at the screen. "You need to function in gravity fields that would turn your skeleton to powder. The atmospheric training happens in gases that would burn your lungs out in seconds, even with protection. And that is just the easy part." Maya had studied every word of the application for months. She knew the odds better than anyone. The selection process had a 98% failure rate, even for species that were naturally built for this kind of work. Humans were not built for any of it. They were too slow, too weak, too limited in every way that mattered. But Maya had noticed something that everyone else seemed to miss. The Elite Operations Division did not just need beings who were fast and strong and smart. Their mission reports showed patterns of failure in situations that required creative thinking and adaptation. The advanced species were powerful, but they were also predictable. They solved problems the same way every time because their superior minds worked in logical patterns. "What about the success stories, sir?" Maya asked, pulling up different files. "Look at the missions where Elite Ops failed, or barely succeeded. Most of them involved situations that required thinking outside normal parameters. The aliens are better than us at everything except figuring out new ways to approach problems. Harrison looked at the mission reports Maya had collected. She had spent months analyzing every elite operations assignment from the past decade. The pattern was there once you knew what to look for. In situations requiring standard tactics and superior abilities, the alien operatives succeeded easily. But when missions required adaptation flexibility or understanding of unpredictable behavior, they struggled. Even if you are right about that, Maya, the selection process will kill you before you get a chance to prove anything, Harrison said. The medical modifications alone require major surgery to integrate alien technology with human biology. The neural implants either work perfectly or they fry your brain. There is no middle ground. Maya stood up and walked to the small window that showed the stars streaming past as the Liberty traveled through hyperspace. Somewhere out there, other species were handling the important work while humans stayed safely in support roles. She thought about her sister Lisa, who dreamed of exploring dangerous worlds and fighting to protect innocent people. Under the current system, Lisa would spend her career loading cargo and fixing broken equipment. "Sir, I am going to submit this application," Maya said, turning back to face her commander. "I know the risks and I know the odds, but if I do not try, then we will never know if humans can do more than just serve coffee to aliens." Harrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he nodded and stood up to leave. At the doorway, he paused and looked back at Maya with something like pride in his eyes. "When you submit that application, Rodriguez, the whole human fleet will be watching," he said. "Do not let us down." Maya waited until he was gone, then turned back to her screen. She filled out every section carefully and uploaded her military records, psychological evaluations, and medical history. At the bottom of the form was a warning in red letters that all applicants understood they might die during the selection process. Maya checked the box acknowledging the risk, then hit submit before she could change her mind. 3 months later, a message arrived that would change everything for humans in space. Maya had been accepted for conditional entry to the Elite Operations Academy. She would be the first human ever to attempt the training. She would also be treated as an experimental subject to test the limits of human capability under extreme conditions. The entire crew of the Liberty gathered to see Maya off when the transport ship arrived. She carried only a small bag of personal items because everything else would be provided at the academy. As she walked toward the airlock, Jake Harrison saluted her with genuine respect. "Good luck, Rodriguez," he said. "Make us proud." Maya saluted. Back then stepped through the airlock toward the most dangerous challenge any human had ever attempted. The transport ship that carried Maya to the Elite Operations Academy was unlike anything she had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and changed as they traveled through space. Her fellow passengers were creatures from species she had only read about in textbooks. A being made of pure light sat across from her, speaking in musical tones to something that looked like a walking tree made of crystal. Maya tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore how different she was from everyone else. These were representatives of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, and they all seemed to belong here in ways that she clearly did not. When the ship finally docked at the Academy station, Maya felt her heart racing as she prepared to step into a world designed for beings far beyond human capability. The Academy itself orbited a neutron star whose massive gravity created training, environments that were impossible to replicate anywhere else. The station was enormous, with sections that rotated to create different gravitational fields and atmospheric conditions. Maya followed the other new arrivals through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever while trying to hide how overwhelmed she felt. "Instructor, Zeth Kalar was waiting in the main assembly hall, and Maya understood immediately why no human had ever survived this place. The Vorthix stood 12 feet tall, with a body made of living crystal that pulsed with internal light. When he spoke, his voice created harmonic frequencies that made Maya's ears hurt and her bones vibrate. The other candidates seemed unaffected by sounds that felt like they might shake her apart. "Welcome to Elite Operations Academy," Zeth Kalar announced, scanning the assembled candidates with eyes that glowed like stars. "You represent 57 of the most capable beings in the galaxy. By the end of this program, only 12 of you will earn certification. The rest will either die or be sent home broken." His crystalline gaze stopped on Maya, and she felt like he was looking directly into her soul. When he spoke again, his words were clearly meant for her, even though he addressed the entire group. "Some of you are here as experiments to test the limitations of inferior species," he said with what might have been amusement. "These candidates will serve as valuable data points about the minimum requirements for elite operations before they inevitably fail." Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment and anger, but she kept her expression neutral. Around her, the other candidates were sizing each other up, and she could feel their dismissive glances when they looked in her direction. A shape-shifting creature called Veltar actually laughed when it realized what she was. The first week of training was designed to break weak candidates quickly and efficiently. Maya found herself struggling with every aspect of the program. Combat simulations took place in atmospheric conditions that required her to wear life support equipment that the other candidates did not need. The weight of the gear alone was almost too much for her human frame to handle while trying to fight opponents who moved faster than her eyes could track. Physical conditioning sessions happened in gravitational fields that compressed her body until she thought her bones would shatter. Maya watched alien candidates perform exercises easily, while she fought just to remain conscious under the crushing pressure. Several times she collapsed completely and had to be carried to the medical bay for treatment. The psychological testing was even worse. Information streams flowed faster than human neural pathways could process, leaving Maya confused and disoriented, while her classmates absorbed data effortlessly. Strategy sessions involved calculations that required processing power far beyond what her biological brain could handle. But Maya had not come this far to give up at the first sign of difficulty. Every night she stayed up late studying the training materials and looking for ways to work around her human limitations. She could not match the raw capabilities of her classmates, but maybe she could find different approaches to the same problems. The breakthrough came during a combat simulation that had stumped every other candidate. The scenario involved rescuing hostages from a space station that was breaking apart in multiple gravitational fields. The Vorthik candidates calculated optimal routes through the debris. The Etherians tried to phase through solid matter to reach the trapped beings. The Syntoids attempted to process all variables simultaneously to find the perfect solution. Maya looked at the same problem and saw something completely different. Instead of focusing on the technical challenges, she studied the holographic hostages themselves. These were not just objects to be moved from point A to point B. They were frightened beings who were panicking as their world fell apart around them. While her classmates tried to force solutions through superior abilities, Maya approached the hostages as individuals. She spoke to them, calmly explaining what was happening and what they needed to do to survive. She helped them understand that following her instructions was their best chance of living through the disaster the holographic beings responded to. Her communication in ways they had not responded to the other candidates. Instead of fighting against rescue attempts or freezing in terror, they worked with Maya to navigate through the collapsing station. Her time was not just faster than any other candidate had achieved. It was faster than the previous record by almost 30%. Instructor Zethkalar called Maya to his office after the simulation ended. His crystalline form pulsed with colors she had never seen before as he tried to process what had happened. According to every analysis, his species had ever done, human neural pathways operated at a tiny fraction of the efficiency needed for elite operations work. Explain how you achieved this result, he demanded, studying readouts that showed Maya's biological functions during the test. Your brain activity patterns do not match any successful candidate profile we have ever recorded. Maya thought carefully about how to answer. She did not want to sound like she was making excuses or trying to diminish the abilities of other species. But she also needed to help him understand that humans approached problems differently than other beings. Sir, I did not try to solve the technical aspects of the rescue faster than anyone else could, she said. I focused on the psychological aspects that the other candidates were ignoring. The hostages were not just obstacles to overcome. They were people who needed someone to help them think clearly under extreme stress. Zethkalar processed this information for several minutes while his crystal body shifted through different color patterns. Finally, he seemed to reach some kind of conclusion that surprised him as much as it did Maya. You are suggesting that your inferior processing capabilities actually provided an advantage in this specific scenario, he said with what might have been curiosity. Rather than attempting to force a computational solution, you addressed the emotional and behavioral variables that others ignored. Maya nodded, feeling like maybe she was finally getting through to him. Humans are not faster or stronger or smarter than other species, sir. But we evolved in environments where survival depended on understanding and working with other beings who were unpredictable. We learned to see patterns in behavior that pure logic might miss. Word of Maya's success began to spread through the academy. Candidates who had dismissed her as a failed experiment started paying attention to her methods. Even some of the instructors began observing her training sessions to understand how someone with clearly inferior capabilities was solving problems that challenged beings with vastly superior mental architecture, the other human candidate said. Academies throughout Coalition space followed Maya's progress through encrypted military channels. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans had someone who was competing at the highest levels and actually succeeding. Maya carried the hopes and dreams of her entire species on her shoulders as she continued to prove that humans belonged among the elite forces of the galaxy. But the hardest tests were still ahead, and Maya knew that one success did not guarantee she would survive what was coming next. News of Maya's breakthrough performance spread through the Galactic Coalition faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. Species that had barely acknowledged human existence were suddenly requesting detailed analysis of her training methods and psychological profiles. The Academy's most advanced artificial intelligence systems ran continuous calculations, trying to understand how someone with inferior processing power was consistently outperforming candidates with quantum consciousness capabilities. Maya found herself under constant observation as alien researchers tried to decode what they were calling the human variable. Every training session was recorded from multiple angles, while sophisticated sensors monitored her biological functions and neural activity patterns. She felt like a laboratory specimen being studied by beings who could not believe what they were seeing. The pressure was immense, but Maya had learned to use it as motivation rather than letting it crush her spirit. Every time she succeeded at something the aliens thought was impossible, she was proving that humans deserved more than support roles in the galactic community. Her little sister Lisa and millions of other humans were counting on her to show that their species had value beyond basic labor and maintenance work. Instructor Zethkalar had become increasingly interested in understanding how Maya's mind worked. He called her to his office several times each week to discuss her approach to various training scenarios. His crystalline form would pulse with different colors as he processed her, explanations of human thinking patterns that seem to operate outside logical frameworks. Your performance continues to exceed all predictions, he said during one of their meetings, while reviewing data from the latest round of tests. Yesterday's tactical simulation required analyzing enemy behavior patterns across 17 different variables. Candidates with quantum processing capabilities took an average of 4.7 minutes to develop workable strategies. You completed the same analysis in 2.1 minutes with higher accuracy ratings. Maya had learned not to be intimidated by his imposing presence or the harmonic frequencies of his voice that still made her ears ring. She leaned forward in her chair and tried to explain something that seemed obvious to her, but apparently made no sense to beings with superior mental architecture. Sir, the other candidates were trying to calculate all possible enemy actions and prepare responses for each scenario, she said. I looked at the enemy commander's previous battles and noticed he always made the same psychological mistake. He was afraid of being trapped, so he always kept escape routes open, even when it hurt his tactical position. Once I understood his fear pattern, I could predict his moves without needing to calculate every possibility. Zethkalar's crystal body shifted to colors Maya had never seen before as he struggled to process this concept. Advanced alien species approached problems through computational analysis that considered all variables simultaneously. The idea of using psychological insight to shortcut complex calculations was completely foreign to their way of thinking. You are describing a form of intuitive analysis that bypasses logical processes entirely, he said with what might have been fascination. Your brain identified patterns through emotional understanding rather than mathematical computation. This should not be possible. Maya realized she was witnessing something historic. For the first time in his long career as an elite operations instructor, Seth Kalar was encountering a type of intelligence that his species had never developed. Humans were not just different from other beings in the galaxy, they represented a completely alternative approach to problem solving that could complement advanced computational thinking. Word of these discoveries was reaching the highest levels of coalition leadership. Species that had treated humans as barely sentient were suddenly requesting human advisors for their most challenging diplomatic and military situations. The rigid hierarchy that had kept humans in inferior positions for 15 years was beginning to crack as alien leaders realized they might have been overlooking valuable capabilities. Maya's fellow candidates at the academy were also changing their attitudes toward her. Veltar, the shape-shifting morphic, had initially laughed at the idea of a human joining elite operations, but now sought her advice on scenarios involving unpredictable variables. Prism 9, the energy-based entity, began incorporating emotional analysis into its strategic planning after watching Maya's methods produce consistently superior results. The transformation was not limited to individual relationships. The academy's entire training curriculum was being revised to incorporate human cognitive approaches alongside traditional computational analysis. Instructors who had taught the same methods for centuries were developing new protocols that leveraged different types of intelligence working together. Maya found herself in the strange position of teaching beings who were vastly superior to her in almost every measurable way. During group training sessions, she would explain how humans approached problems, while her classmates shared their computational techniques. The combination of intuitive and logical analysis produced results that none their approach could achieve. Alone, the breakthrough moment came during a war game simulation that involved multiple fleets, engaging in complex strategic maneuvers across several star systems. Traditional elite operations doctrine called for calculating optimal resource allocation and tactical positioning based on mathematical analysis of all variables. Maya suggested a different approach that her classmates initially dismissed as impossible. What if we stop trying to outcalculate the enemy and start trying to outthink them? she proposed during the planning session. Instead of assuming they will make mathematically optimal decisions, let's assume they will make psychologically predictable ones based on their species' characteristics and command structure. The alien candidates were skeptical, but agreed to try Maya's approach since conventional methods had failed in previous simulations. She spent hours studying the psychological profiles of enemy commanders, while her teammates handled the computational aspects of fleet coordination and resource management. When the simulation began, Maya's predictions proved remarkably accurate. Enemy fleets moved exactly where she had expected based on her analysis of their commanders' psychological patterns and cultural biases. The combined human-alien strategy achieved a 94% mission success rate compared to the typical 70% achieved by purely computational approaches. The results sent shockwaves through elite operations command structure. For centuries, they had relied on the assumption that superior computational power was the key to tactical success. Maya had proven that understanding psychology and behavior could be just as important as calculating mathematical probabilities. Instructor Zeth Kalar found himself in the unprecedented position of recommending major changes to training protocols that had been perfected over hundreds of years. His reports to Academy leadership described the human variable as a revolutionary development that could transform how elite operations approached complex missions. Candidate Rodriguez has not simply succeeded despite her limitations, he wrote. In his official evaluation, she has demonstrated that what we considered limitations are actually alternative capabilities that complement our existing methods. Human intuitive analysis provides strategic advantages that pure computational thinking cannot achieve alone. Maya's success was inspiring changes throughout human space as well. Military academies on Earth and human colonies began developing new curricula that emphasized the cognitive advantages their species possessed. Young humans who had grown up believing they were inferior to alien species suddenly saw new possibilities for their futures in the galactic community. The term human intuition became a recognized strategic doctrine studied by advanced species throughout the coalition. Maya Rodriguez had not just proven that humans could succeed in elite operations. She had shown that human thinking patterns were valuable assets that the galaxy needed. But the final examination was still ahead, and Maya knew that everything she had accomplished so far would mean nothing if she could not pass the ultimate test that had defeated so many candidates before her. The final examination at Elite Operations Academy was legendary throughout the galaxy for its brutality and impossibility. Every candidate who had made it this far knew they would face the Battle of Kepler 442b, simulation that had broken the spirits of thousands of the best military minds from the most advanced species. Maya stood with her remaining classmates in the preparation chamber, knowing that only half of them would pass and earn their elite operations certification. The Battle of Kepler 442b was a real historical disaster where a coalition force had encountered an unknown alien armada and suffered devastating losses despite having superior technology and numerical advantages. For 2 centuries, military analysts had studied every aspect of the engagement, trying to understand how such a catastrophic defeat had occurred. The simulation recreated the exact conditions and challenged candidates to achieve better results than the original commanders. Maya had spent weeks studying the historical records while her classmates focused on computational analysis of fleet movements and tactical positioning. What she found in the archives troubled her in ways that pure military data could not explain. The unknown aliens had not fought like conquerors seeking territory or resources. Their attack patterns showed desperation and fear that suggested they were fighting for survival rather than strategic advantage. Instructor Zeth Kalar briefed the candidates on the simulation parameters with his usual emotionless efficiency. His crystalline form pulsed with steady light as he explained that they would command coalition forces against an enemy that had proven capable of destroying fleets with tactics that defied logical analysis. No candidate in Academy history had ever achieved better than a 70% survival rate for coalition forces. The enemy force consists of ships using unknown technology and unpredictable tactics, he announced while holographic displays showed the original battle formations. Traditional analysis suggests their victory resulted from superior firepower and strategic positioning. You must find ways to overcome these advantages or accept casualties that previous commanders considered unavoidable. Maya listened to the briefing, but her mind was focused on details that seemed to escape everyone else. The alien ships in the historical records were not built for conquest or expansion. Their designs showed characteristics of refugee vessels hastily converted for military use. Their attack patterns were aggressive, but also showed signs of panic and desperation that computational analysis had missed. When the simulation began, Maya found herself commanding a coalition fleet of 200 ships facing an enemy force of unknown composition and capabilities. Her classmates immediately began calculating optimal attack formations and resource allocation patterns based on mathematical analysis of the tactical situation. Maya opened communication channels and tried something that no previous candidate had ever attempted. She broadcast a message to the enemy fleet in every known language and communication protocol. Instead of demanding surrender or issuing threats, she asked questions about their intentions and offered to discuss alternatives to military conflict. Her fellow candidates watched in amazement as she attempted to establish diplomatic contact during what was supposed to be a pure combat simulation. The enemy response was unlike anything in the historical records. Instead of immediately attacking, they hesitated and began transmitting data about their civilization and the crisis that had driven them to desperation. Maya learned that they were refugees from a dying star system who had been fleeing across the galaxy for generations seeking a new home. The Battle of Kepler 442b had occurred when they encountered coalition forces, blocking their path to uninhabited systems where they could have settled safely. Maya realized that the historical disaster had been completely unnecessary. The unknown. Aliens had not been conquerors seeking to destroy coalition civilization. They had been desperate refugees who attacked only because they believed they had no other choice. 200 years of military analysis had missed the most important factor in the engagement, because computational thinking could not account for the psychological and cultural variables that drove the conflict. Working quickly, Maya proposed a solution that addressed the aliens' actual needs rather than responding to their military capabilities. She offered them safe passage to uninhabited star systems that the coalition had already surveyed but not claimed. She shared technological resources that could help them establish new colonies without threatening existing civilizations. She proposed a mutual defense pact that would benefit both species and prevent future conflicts. The enemy fleet that had destroyed coalition forces in the original battle accepted Maya's proposals and agreed to become allies rather than enemies. The simulation ended with a 98.7% ERCENT survival rate for coalition forces and the establishment of a new member species that brought advanced technologies and strategic advantages to the galactic community. Instructor Seth Kalar stood before the assembled candidates with his crystalline form pulsing in colors that Maya had learned indicated deep confusion and respect. For the first time in his long career, he was faced with results that invalidated fundamental assumptions about military strategy and conflict resolution. Candidate Rodriguez has not simply passed the final examination, he announced with harmonic frequencies that carried undertones of amazement. She has proven that our most carefully analyzed military disaster could have been prevented through understanding rather than superior firepower. The scenario we have used for 2 centuries was based on incorrect assumptions about enemy motivations. and objectives. The other candidates, who had spent years preparing for computational combat, found themselves witnessing a complete transformation of elite operations doctrine. Maya had shown that the galaxy's most devastating military defeat had resulted from failure to understand psychological and cultural factors rather than inadequate tactical analysis. Word of Maya's success spread through Coalition space faster than hyperspace communications could carry it. Species that had dismissed human capabilities were suddenly requesting detailed reports on her methods and requesting human advisors for their own military challenges. The rigid doctrines that had governed elite operations for centuries were being rewritten to incorporate human approaches to conflict resolution. The graduation ceremony was broadcast throughout the galaxy as Maya Rodriguez became the first human to earn elite operations certification. But her achievement represented more than individual success. She had fundamentally changed how the most advanced military minds in the galaxy approached strategic thinking and diplomatic solutions. Coalition leadership began implementing new protocols that required psychological and cultural analysis alongside traditional computational planning. Military academies throughout known space started developing curricula that emphasized understanding enemy motivations, rather than simply calculating optimal ways to destroy them. Maya's success had implications beyond military strategy. Diplomatic missions that had failed for decades were suddenly achieving breakthrough results when human negotiators applied intuitive understanding of alien psychology to complex political situations. Trade disputes were resolved through cultural insight rather than economic calculations. Territorial conflicts were prevented by addressing underlying fears and needs, rather than simply managing resource allocation. The transformation was not limited to human achievements. Alien species began studying human cognitive patterns and developing hybrid approaches that combined computational analysis with intuitive understanding. The galaxy was discovering that diversity of thinking was more valuable in superiority in any single area. As Maya prepared to receive her certification, she thought about her sister Lisa and the millions of humans who would now have opportunities that had never existed before. The galaxy was finally ready to accept that humans brought unique value that could not be measured by traditional standards of intelligence or capability. Maya Rodriguez had not just proven that humans could join elite operations. She had shown that human thinking was essential for solving problems that pure computational analysis could not address. The species that had been dismissed as barely sentient had become partners in shaping the future of galactic civilization. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance 6 months after her graduation from Elite Operations Academy and marveled at how much the galaxy had changed. Her ship was the first vessel designed specifically to integrate human intuitive systems with advanced alien computational technology. The bridge crew represented the most diverse team in Coalition history, with beings from 6 different species working together in ways that had never been attempted before. The Defiance was more than just a ship. It was proof that the galaxy had accepted humans as equals rather than support staff. Vorthic analysts whose crystal matrices could process Maya's intuitive insights into actionable intelligence worked alongside Etherian scouts who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Syntoid engineers with quantum processors implemented creative solutions that emerged from human pattern recognition, while human officers provided the psychological understanding that computational thinking often missed. Maya's first major assignment as an elite operations commander came when the Coalition encountered a new threat that traditional military doctrine seemed powerless to address. The Hive Collective was a species that operated through pure logical consensus, where individual identity did not exist. They had begun systematically eliminating what they classified as chaotic civilizations that threatened their concept of universal order through unpredictable behavior. Standard Coalition forces had failed completely in their attempts to establish meaningful contact with the hive. The aliens could not comprehend concepts like individual decision-making or creative expression. That did not serve logical purposes. Every diplomatic mission had ended with the hive concluding that coalition species were mentally defective and required elimination for the good of galactic order. Maya studied the intelligence reports while her diverse crew analyzed the situation. From their different perspectives, the Vorthic officers calculated optimal defensive positions and resource allocation strategies. The Etherian scouts provided multi-dimensional reconnaissance data about hive fleet movements. The Syntoids processed communication patterns and technological capabilities. But it was Maya's human insight that identified the key to resolving the crisis without devastating warfare. They are not evil or malicious, she explained during a strategy meeting with her senior staff. The hive truly believes that eliminating chaotic species is necessary for galactic stability and prosperity. From their perspective, they are trying to save the universe from the harmful effects of unpredictable behavior. We need to show them that chaos and creativity can actually benefit their logical systems rather than threatening them. The approach Maya developed was unlike anything in elite operations history. Instead of trying to communicate with the entire hive collective, she focused on isolating individual units and exposing them to concepts that existed outside pure logical frameworks. She used human art music and literature to demonstrate that patterns could create meaning and beauty without serving computational purposes. The breakthrough came when Maya played a piece of classical music for a captured hive unit that had been separated from the collective consciousness. The alien being experienced something it had never encountered before: emotional responses to organized sound patterns that served no logical function, but created feelings that it could not quantify or explain. What is the purpose of these vibrations? The hive unit asked through its translation interface. They provide no useful information and accomplish no measurable objectives, yet they generate responses in my processing matrix that I cannot categorize. Maya smiled as she realized she was witnessing the birth of individual consciousness in a being that had never experienced personal thoughts or feelings. That response you are having is called appreciation, she explained gently. It does not serve a logical purpose, but it makes existence more meaningful and beautiful. That is what humans call art. The isolated hive unit began experimenting with creating its own sound patterns that served no computational function, but expressed something the being could not define through logical analysis. When other hive units encountered these creations, they experienced similar responses that spread through their collective consciousness, like what Maya could only describe as an infection of creativity. Instead of destroying the hive collective's unity, the introduction of creative expression added new dimensions to their existence. They discovered that logical analysis combined with intuitive creativity produced results that neither approach could achieve alone. The species that had been determined to eliminate chaos began requesting membership in the coalition so they could learn more about the benefits of unpredictable thinking. The war that every coalition strategist had considered inevitable ended with the hive collective bringing technological capabilities that advanced every member species by centuries. Their quantum processing abilities, combined with human creative insight, produced breakthroughs in science, medicine, and engineering that revolutionized galactic civilization. Maya's success had triggered changes throughout human space that went far beyond military applications. Academies on Earth and human colonies developed new educational programs that emphasized the cognitive advantages their species possessed. Young humans who had grown up believing they were inferior to alien species suddenly saw opportunities for leadership roles throughout the galaxy. The term human intuition became a required course of study at coalition universities and military academies. Species that had existed for millions of years were learning from humans who had been considered barely sentient just months earlier. The rigid hierarchies that had kept humans in support roles were replaced by merit-based systems that valued different types of intelligence equally. Admiral Jake Harrison visited Maya during a fleet review ceremony where human ships served alongside the most advanced vessels in the galaxy. As they stood together watching mixed crews of humans and aliens working with unprecedented efficiency, he shook his head in amazement at how quickly everything had changed. "Do you remember when you filled out that application, Rodriguez?" he asked, with genuine pride in his voice. "I thought you were throwing your career away on an impossible dream. I never imagined you would end up changing how the entire galaxy thinks about intelligence and capability." Maya looked out at the stars where human exploration vessels were leading joint missions to uncharted systems, while human diplomats negotiated complex treaties between species that had been enemies for centuries. The transformation was more complete than she had dared to hope when she first decided to challenge the restrictions that had limited her people. "Sir, I was not trying to save my career," she replied, thinking about her sister, Lisa, who was now training at the Elite Operations Academy, alongside candidates from the most advanced species in the galaxy. "I was trying to prove that humans deserved a chance to show what we could contribute to galactic civilization. We were accepting second-class status in our own galaxy because we believed the aliens who told us we were not good enough." The final scene of Maya's journey showed coalition recruitment centers throughout human space, where the signs no longer read support personnel needed, but elite operations division. All species welcome human perspective essential. Children who had grown up dreaming of exploring the galaxy now had realistic chances of commanding their own ships and leading missions to protect innocent civilizations throughout known space. Maya Rodriguez had achieved something more important than personal success. She had proven that being human was not a limitation to overcome, but a strength to celebrate. Her species had found their place among the stars, not by becoming more like other beings, but by showing that human thinking was exactly what the galaxy needed to solve its most challenging problems. The girl who had stared at an impossible application in her tiny quarters aboard the Liberty had become the symbol of humanity's potential and the proof that no dream was too large for those willing to fight for it. Maya had not just opened doors for her own species, she had shown the entire galaxy that diversity of thought was more valuable